The first concept, conditional operator. We can also call it as the ternary operator also. We know about unary operators, binary operators, and third category is there, which is ternary operator. We can also call it as the conditional operator. So the conditional operator, actually, it is the simplified version of if-else statement. We know the control decision-making statements, if-else. So instead of writing if-else every time, in some situations, this conditional operator or ternary operator will really help us to write the code in very cleaner way. And you might have learned about this conditional operator in C language also. So in all programming languages, this conditional operator was there. So let us see how to work with this conditional operator practically. So the syntax of this conditional operator is, first of all, we are going to write some condition. We know what is a condition means. If you take the comparison operators, okay, so then it leads to a condition. After writing the condition, we can place the question mark. After the question mark, you can write the first expression here, expression 1, colon, and then we can write the second expression, expression 2. This is the simple syntax of conditional operator, or we can also call it as the ternary operator. So the syntax for the operator syntax will be like this. Question mark and colon. This is the operator. We can call it as either conditional operator or ternary operator. So how this syntax look like with this operator means, after writing the condition, we can place the question mark, and then we can write expression 1 colon expression 2. What is the meaning of this expression here in total? So every condition will have only two possibilities. Either it can be true or false. There is no third possibility. If the condition is true, expression 1 will be evaluated. If the condition is false, expression 2 will be evaluated. That's it. Okay, if condition is true, expression 1 will be evaluated. If condition is false, expression 2 will be evaluated, which is exactly same as the if-else statement. So here we can write something like this, if and else. So how it works, if condition is true, if block will work, otherwise else block will work. So this is same, but you can see it is simple to write than this lengthy if-else statement in many situations. Okay, so now I'm going to take an example and I will have demonstrate you how to write that by using if-else, and then I will show you how to simplify that by using this ternary operator also. Now let's take very simple example. I want to find the big number of given two numbers. Now I am not considering their equality, I am considering only their inequality. So that's why let us take two variables here, let A10, B20. So first I am going to write by using if else. So if A greater than B, so the syntax is quite simple here. If A greater than B, so we are going to write return A. Okay, else return B. That's it, guys. So it is ready. If condition is true, it returns A, otherwise it returns B. Okay, so this is the way to write the syntax. So if you want to see the result, actually instead of returning that, you can even write console statements here. So here I can write A is big, or simply I can print A, and here also I can directly print the result, that is B. Now let me save this program. We can see the result is 20 because 20 is bigger. If I change the value of A to 100, when I save this program, we can see 100 is the big number in these two. So this syntax is by using if else we used. Now I'm going to write the same syntax by using the ternary operator. Ternary operator or conditional operator, anything it can be. So first I need to write the condition. What is the condition here? A greater than B, that is the condition. Now I can write the question mark. So if the condition is true, it should return A. Then I can write A here, colon B. So here by default it returns the result. That's why we no need to write something like return A, return B. It will throw the error. You can write something like this, and here it returns the result into some variable. So I placed a variable here called result, and let me print the result here for verification. Save it. We can see we got the same result. Now let's compare. It is matter of 4 lines, but we can simplify that to 1 line. So because of the small changes like this, our code base length decreased a lot and it is easy to understand. That's why everyone should know these facilities. If you write this if else, still it is correct, nothing wrong in that. But if you try to use such kind of simple representations, so your code will be very efficient. So now you can compare these two so that you can get the benefit of this one. In that way, we can write. So now you may ask, sir, the ternary operator is an absolute alternative for this if else? Not at all. In this case, the if statement and else statement contains only one line of code. At that time, this would be useful. For example, if the if block have some 10 lines of code, else block has some 5 lines of code, then if else is good choice, because if you write such kind of expression in this way, it would be more confusing. So when you have some simple expressions in this way, then this will be the good choice and it will be the good alternative for if else. Now I want to find the equality also. As of now, I'm just focused on inequality. Now I need to focus on equality also. Else if A is equal to B, then it should return both are equal. Else CLG B. Now we can see that it is giving, yeah, I forgot to keep. Now we can see the result is 100. For example, if I make these two as equal, we can see both are equal. So now here we are verifying two conditions actually. So this ternary operator will be very easy to us when we are dealing with one condition. Of course, you can use this ternary operator to check multiple conditions also, but the syntax can be slightly difficult. When you want to work with these multiple conditions, so try to use if else only. Don't go for this ternary, which may create some confusion. But when you are dealing with just one condition and body also contains just 1 or 2 lines of the code, then this would be the great choice. Okay, but still it is possible to verify multiple conditions even with ternary operator. Now I am going to write the same if else kind of syntax by using this ternary operator. See how it would be. Now let me check the equality. If A is equal to B, okay, so then it should return both are equal. See here, if A is equal to B, that is the condition. If condition is true, first expression will be evaluated. So it returns both are equal. Else means I keep colon. So if both are not equal, again I need to write one more condition about their inequality. So A greater than B. Then if A is greater, it should return A, otherwise it should return B. Now you can save it, you can see it is saying both are equal. So now these two things are same, but when you are writing multiple conditions, this is first condition and this is second condition. So beginners like you might feel little bit difficulty to work with these multiple conditions in many situations. Okay, so that's why here my personal choice is when you are dealing with multiple conditions, so try to work with if else only. And for a single condition, so this ternary operator would be the good choice. So let me explain you how I write these two conditions. Same and very simple story here. Write the condition as usually, write the first expression. If the condition is failed, then we need to check one more condition. That's why here after colon, I write one more condition. If I write the condition, immediately I place the question mark, and again if this condition is true, it returns A, otherwise it returns B. Now it is working. Let me check this with some different values also. Now I changed this to 200. Now we can find both are giving the result as 200. So if I change this to 1000, for example, both are giving it's equal to 1000. Now if I make them both are equal, so it's working. That means this 6 lines of code and the single line both are working in the same way, so that it is totally your personal choice to go with either if else or ternary operator. But in some situations, this ternary operator is really very much useful to us. I think you already learned about this ternary operator in C as well as C++ also. In Java also this operator is available. Okay, it's very easy to understand and very easy to use. And one important thing is in React.js, we are going to use this conditional rendering very extensively. So you may not use this very extensively in some other languages, but in the React.js programming, this conditional rendering will be, this conditional operator will be very, very essential. Almost in every component, we are going to use this conditional rendering. That's why here, so every day try to practice whenever you write some if else, try to repeat the same by using this conditional operator also or ternary operator. You will get good understanding on this ternary operator itself. So that is the first simple concept that we have discussed on today's session. This is simple. The next one is special operations on array. So this is little bit lengthy concept and it is a little bit complicated concept. So everyone should focus here and it is really very, very important. I'm going to explain these special operations by taking various real world examples also. Okay, stay focused here. What are special operations? Already we worked on many operations on an array like insertion, deletion, updation, search, updation. These kind of operations we have performed on an array already. Then what are special operations again? Yes, so many special operations are there that we are going to discuss. And one important thing is all these special operations are introduced in ES6. So if you want to perform the same operations before ES6, we need to write the manual code. But in the ES6, so many new methods were introduced to perform these special operations. For example, let me take one special operation like searching. So if you want to search for a particular element on an array, before 2015, we need to write the manual logic. But in the ES6 version, they developed a method so that by using that method, you can simply find the searching element. And if you want to filter some unwanted elements, before 2015, before ES6, we need to write the manual logic. But in ES6, a method was there which can be used to perform the filter operation. So those are called as the special operations that we are going to focus. And these are the special operations that we are going to discuss. Filter method, map method, for each method, reduce method, find index. Very, very important methods which we will use very extensively in our React programming, Vue.js programming, Angular programming, Node.js programming also. Very important methods. So for the beginners, it may be a little bit difficult to understand, but I will explain you with various examples after the session as usually. So practice them until you get proper command on these functions. So let us discuss about all these methods one by one. These are not functions, guys. These are the methods. So you need to call these methods on array. Array.filter, array.map, etc. But one complicated thing in the syntax, when you observe, every method is taking a callback function as the argument. Up to now, guys, we worked with various methods or functions. They are receiving a number as the argument, a string as the argument, an object as the argument, array as the argument. So something like either primitives or non-primitives have taken as arguments for a functions or methods. But these methods receives another function as argument. Filter method is receiving a function as argument. In JavaScript, it is possible. Okay, so generally, if you write a function here, for example, let me close it. I want to create a new application. World.js, let me connect here. So for example, if I have taken some normal function, for example, here, like test function, and if I have taken a here, let me print the value a here. So for this particular function, if I want to call it, so I can send a number. Save it, you can see it prints the value as 10. So here let me write value of a is comma a. So now I can see value of a is 10. That means this function is receiving a number as the argument. Fine. Next, I can send a string. Now it is saying the value of a is hello, means now this function is receiving a string as the argument. Fine. Next, if I send a Boolean value, so now a receives the Boolean value, we can find the value is true. Not only that, I can send an array also like this. So now this non-primitive is the argument for this. Now value of a is 1020, and you can send even an object also like this. So let it be a value 10 or some x value 10. Save it, you can see the now a has received this object. That means the parameters of a function or method, same thing for methods also. Only syntax is different, but the parameters are common for both methods as well as functions. So if we take a parameter, that parameter can receive either primitives or non-primitives. That means under primitive category, it can receive or numbers, strings, booleans as arguments, or under the non-primitive, they can receive either array or object as the arguments. That is fine. We worked with many examples like this. But in JavaScript, it is possible to send a function as argument to other function or method. That means, for example, let me write a function here, something like this. Okay, so here, just I am sending some simple result, CLG, callback function, for example. So now what happened here, I am calling the test function, and at the time of calling test function, I need to pass an argument. So what I'm sending from here, this is a function basically, it is anonymous function. So why I'm sending the anonymous function means this variable will act as the name of this function. That's why I no need to make it as a named function. It is an anonymous function. Now this variable a will receive the entire function. So let me save and see here. The value of a is, now you can find it is an entire function the a has received. So now if you want to call that function, so after a, keep pair of braces, because the variable a has received this particular function. So if you want to call the function after the name of the variable, we can write the pair of parenthesis. Now we can see the function has called. It is line number 7 here. In this place, this function has called. So here I just write some callback function. It is what. So this is the important point that everyone should aware of in JavaScript. So the arguments to a function, not only primitives and non-primitives. So functions can also send as argument to other function. So now if a function is sending as argument to the other function, we can call that as callback function. So here this anonymous function is called as callback function. Okay, so that is the story of the callback function, and so many functions in our JavaScript contains this kind of mechanism. So there is a special reason for this. The reason is, so this callback function won't execute immediately. For example, here I have called the test function. So when I call the test function, then this test function will execute immediately. But what about this callback function? This callback function will execute later. For example, here I have called the callback function, then only it will execute, otherwise it won't execute. In many situations in our programming, some functions need to execute later, not immediately. So many examples we are going to see. As of now, if you do not able to understand that point, just skip it. Okay, so very soon we are going to focus heavily on the callback functions. But important thing regarding the callback functions is a callback function is a function which send as argument for another function. Let me write the theory here. Callback function is a function which is sending as argument to another function. So we can either call it as callback function, or sometimes we can call it as callback only. Callback means it is nothing but callback function. Don't get confused, because in many situations we no need to use this lengthy name like callback function. We can simply call it as the callback. Callback means we are talking about callback function. So hope you are at least clear with this example. So with this example, you need to realize only one thing. It is possible to send functions also as argument in JavaScript. Okay, and the function that we are sending as argument can be called as callback technically. Hope you are at least understand what is callback function. Okay, so now with this knowledge, let us try to understand the functions given here. Filter function, map, for each, reduce, find index. Very, very important and very useful methods here. So let us discuss about each of them individually, but all have some common functionality. Okay, so I will teach you the common functionality here, and then we can go for the individual functionalities. They all have some common feature. Let us see that first, and then we can go for the independent features here. So all these methods should be called on an array. For example, let us take this array which contains some 4 elements here. Dot, in place of this method, you can imagine any one of these 6 methods in place of this method, because this is the common example for all these methods. So in the place of the method here, we can either imagine filter, map, for each, any one of the 6 methods in this place. And we need to write a callback function as the argument. Okay, so how these methods are going to use this callback function? Listen to this clearly. The method that we are using here will take first element from the array and pass that element as argument to this callback function and calls the callback function. That means this method that I'm writing here, that is either filter or map, whatever in this place. First, it will take the first element of the array, that is 10, pass the value 10 as argument to this callback function and executes this. Next, it will take the second element 20, pass it as argument and executes the callback function. So here this array has 4 values. Then this method will call the callback function for 4 times by sending each element at once. So why we are calling this as a callback means this callback function is called by this method. This method is called by my program. My program calls this method, but who is calling this callback function? This method is calling the callback function. And how it is calling the callback function? By sending each element as an argument. That's why here it is passing the values like a stream, 10 initially, 20 initially, 30, 40, and so on. For example, if the length of the array is some 10 here, total elements, let's imagine it is 10. Then this method will call this callback function for 10 times, and each time it is sending the elements from first to last in the order to this one. That is the common behavior. So in place of this method, if you write filter, filter also do the same. Map also do the same. For each, reduce, find index, all the methods will do the same. But what's the difference then? If all are doing same kind of job, what's the difference? The difference exists in the callback function. The difference exists. So that means after receiving a value, what callback function is doing. So that that differs from one method to other method in this place. So this is the common feature and the differences among these methods here. So let us start writing the examples one by one and see how these methods behave with very practical examples. The first one is filter method. Remember, filter method is used for selection purpose. Selection means it allows you to select whatever the elements you want from the array. So let's discuss that with an example. First, let me take an array here with some values. I'm taking some unordered array here with various combinations. Okay, so let's take this array. It is an unordered array because unordered in the sense unsorted actually. Our values are randomly placed into this one. Fine. Remember guys, when an array is received by your application need not to work with each and every element of the array. Sometimes it need to work with only some elements of the array. Some elements may be first element or last element or some element in between them. For that purpose, we can use different methods. But if it want to work with some elements here, which are existed in different locations, it may have various requirements. For example, now my application needs the elements less than 50. For example, let's take this requirement. So my application has received a big array, but all the elements of the array not required in this context. It need to work with the elements which are less than 50. Let us take this example. So if you want to find the elements which are less than 50, we need to write a complex syntax here manually. First, we need to take a for loop or while loop, whatever it can be. And every time we have to compare these elements. If it is less than 50, we need to push them into the new array. And finally, we have to get the new array with the elements which are less than 50. It's a complex syntax actually, but we no need to go with such complex syntax here because filter method is designed to do the same. First, I want to write without using any filter method. Let me write the manual logic for this method, first method, so that you can understand how the new features simplifies the developer's task. Now, without using filter method, I'm going to write the manual logic. Manual logic means I'm not using any facilities given by JavaScript. I'm going to use the basic features of JavaScript and try to write this. So first of all, I have to iterate here. First, I need to take an empty array. So result, it is an empty array which contains nothing. Finally, I have to fill this result array with the elements which are less than 50. And this result array can be used by my application. So here I'm using the for of loop because to iterate an array, for of is the best choice. So let some element here. Okay, so of ARR. So meaningfully, I have taken the variable name as element. Here it should check if element is less than 50, because I need only the elements which are less than 50. If the element is less than 50, then it has to push that element into the result array. That means result dot push is equal of element. So if it is less than 50, then that element will be pushed into this. If it is not less than 50, it will be simply ignored. After the loop iteration, finally we are going to get the result array. Save it. We can see this is the array whose values are less than 50. See here, is it less than 50 or not? So it has filtered out all the elements which are above 50. It returned us only the elements which are less than 50, because my program requires only the elements which are less than 50 in this context. So this is the manual logic I have used. For this manual logic, so I need to take an empty array and I need to verify each element. Is it less than 50 or not? If it is less than 50, simply I have to push that element into this result array. So this is the logic we need to write. Okay, so now I'm going to do the same by using filter method and see the difference. So now filter is the method, so that on the array object we have to call the filter method. Okay, now we know all these methods take a callback function. So here I can take a callback function like this. So now this is a callback function and it is anonymous. And I said that this method, whatever it is, filter or map, anything, take element one by one and send that element as argument to this callback. So to receive that element, here we need to provide some parameter. So now this variable element receives the first element and second element and third element. Here we no need to write for loop. So the filter method will execute until the length of this array. If the length of the array is 15, for example, then this filter method will call this callback function for 15 times. Okay, so now here, if it is less than 50, simply it should return that element. Okay, here I am going to write the logic. If element less than 50, then it has to return that element. Okay, and finally it gets the result. Let me name it as result 1 here and see is it working or not by printing this to the console. Result 1 here, exactly same array you got here. Okay, now this is the simple syntax when compared with this lengthy one, because here we have not created any new array. Here I created the new array and manually pushed the values into that array. But when you come to this logic, I didn't create any single array here, new array, and I have not performed any push operation. But how it returns this array? That means this callback function will receive the element by element every time. After receiving the element, it will compare and return. When the callback function returns the element, to whom it returns, we know that a function or method to whom it returns the result in C or C++ anywhere. If a function is called, to whom it will return the result? Can you post your response in WhatsApp group? Any one of you? When a function or method is called, so to whom it returns the result? If any function is called, to whom it returns the result? Anyone? Very basic question it is, right? When a function is called, to whom it returns the result? Because every function contains the return keyword, that means it is returning to whom. Yes, so here I got the response to call function. Whoever called that function, so that result is returned to him. So that is 100% right answer and very good. Okay, so now let's come to this part. So now this particular callback function is called by whom here? It is called by the filter method. I said that these callback functions are called by the method which we are writing here. In this context, it is filter method. So this callback function's return keyword returns this element to the filter method. What the filter method will do is, it will collect all the elements returned by this and keep elements inside of a new array and returns that new array. That means here manually, whatever the new array we created, manually pushing the elements, these two tasks will be done by the filter method behind the scenes. That's why here we no need to do any such kind of activities. Okay, so that is the benefit. Now you can simplify this function expression into arrow function, and you can see how it would be. Now I'm writing the same by using arrow function. Okay, so using arrow function, and so that you can see the power of arrow functions in some situations. Let result 3 is equal to, of course, arr dot filter. So here it is receiving one element, one parameter, so we no need to write the parenthesis also, and I have taken the arrow operator. Okay, so here I can write element less than 50. That's it. So here by default return keyword is there. It can return if the element is less than 50. So here we no need to write if condition also. Simply we can write element less than 50. Here also you can simplify this by removing like return element less than 50. Still it works. Okay, so now you can see this function contains only one line of code, that is to return some value. I explained you arrow functions are very useful when the body contains one line that to return some value. That means why can't we simplify this using arrow function? So here I write this entire callback function as a arrow function. Here we can find so element and element less than 50. So here we no need to write the return keyword because return keyword is by default existed in the arrow functions. Now let me print the result 3 here. See LG result 3. Save it, you got the same result again. So now you can see which is best in these three. This is the manual approach. This is using filter method but without using arrow functions. This is the approach by using arrow function. Which is simple in these three? Definitely the third one is very simple because everything is just in one line. So in many situations, the arrow functions are very much useful. I said that, so in many situations in our application development, the function body can have only one line. So many examples. So from today onwards, we are going to experience those examples. Filter method is one such example. Many situations, it contains the body as one line. Then you can simplify that by using this syntax. Now I want some other elements whose values are less than 50 and 80. I want the elements between 50 and 80. So now I'm removing all these things because we no need to go with this manual logic and no need to go with this normal approach. Simply we can use this arrow function syntax itself. Okay. So now for example, I want the elements between 50 and 100. Another requirement. What should I do now? Here element should be greater than 50, and that means logical AND operator element less than 100. That's it. Okay, so element is less than 50 and it's common sense, it is right. Element should be greater than 50 and less than 100. I have used the logical AND operator. So now we can see here the result. So that is 76. Only one element is there between 50 and 100. No other elements are existed. Now I want to get between 100 and 200. So it should be greater than 100 and less than 200. Save it. So no elements are existed here between 100 and 200. So it returns the empty array. Now I want between 100 and 500, and see here no elements are existed. 500 and 800, 100 and 800, only one element is there, that is this. Now I want elements between 10 and 100, for example, 10 and 100. You can see, so this good number of elements are existed between 10 and 100 here. Hope you find the benefit of this filter method and the use of arrow functions to simplify our code in this way very easily. Hope you are clear with the filter method. This can be used to filter out unwanted elements here, hence it is clear. So now once you understand one of the function syntax, you can understand the remaining methods very easily. Okay, because each method has its own behavior, but the common functionality is calling the callback function by the outside method by sending each element one by one. That is the common functionality. So if you understand that common functionality clearly, so it would be very easy to focus on specific functionality of each of these methods. That is the filter method, and the purpose of filter method means to select required elements. Selection operation, we can also call it as the selection operation, which means selecting the required elements. That is called as the filter. In many situations, this filter method would be very much useful to us. Okay, so now you may have the doubt, sir, this array is simple. Because each element is a number, so we could able to write this kind of logic. For example, I have a different use case here. Let me take one more array of objects. Let students, okay, it is array of objects. So the first object, student number 100, age 20. Okay, so the first object is ready, and I'm writing the second object. S number is 200 and age is 25. Next, S number is 300 and age is 30. So let us take this array of objects. Now I want to filter the students whose age less than 25. Okay, so 25 in the sense, let me take some more objects here. So it's 20 and it is 22, 30, and this is 35, for example. Okay, I have taken array of objects. Now how can I filter? Every time if you take such a simple array where each element is a primitive, your job is quite simple. But we are going to work with array of objects also. For example, now this data is given to you and you are asked to find the students. You want the students whose age is less than 25, because your application need to process the data whose value is less than 25. How can I do that here? Yes, so now I'm going to write let result. I can write some meaningful result students. Okay, so I'm taking some variable like result students is equal to, so what should I do now? On the array, that means students dot, we have to call the filter method, because filter method helps us to select whatever the data we need. And what the filter method will do, it will send element by element to this callback function. Okay, here I'm going to write the arrow function here. Okay, and what is the element here? If you take the first array, each element is a number. Fine, but when you come here, each element is an object. It is not a primitive. Each element, this is the first element is an object, second element, third element, and fourth element. Each element is an object. That means here it is getting the object here, so I can take the variable name as student object. Why? Because if you take something like this, you can feel this as an object. If you take element here, you may confuse, is it a single value or non-primitive, something like. For the first array, each element is a number, so that we can take the variable name as element, that is fine. But when you come to the students array here, each element is not a number or something, each element is an object. That's why here the filter method will send each element once to this callback function. So I have taken the variable name as student object. And what should I search here? It should return, so student object dot age less than 25. That's it, guys. If student object contains a feature called age and it should be less than 25. Now let me print this and check, did we get the exact result or not? I can write the result students, save it. Now it has returned two array of two objects. Let me expand this and you can see, yes, it has given me only two objects, because these two objects only have the value that is less than 25. The age is less than 25. For the remaining two objects, one of them age is 30 and for other student it is 35. So for the primitives, you can do like this, and for non-primitives, that is array of objects, you can write these kind of syntax exactly. Okay, so hope you are clear with the way to write such kind of things. Let me make it a little bit bigger for your better understanding. Yeah, that's it, guys. In this way, we can write these applications. Let me expand this a bit and a bit like this. Yeah, so now That's the way to work with. So in our application development, we need to work with some simple arrays as well as some complex arrays also like this. Then we have to write in this way. Cool. So now the filter method is completed. For the purpose of filter method is to filter or to select the required elements. That is nothing but filtering. The next one is map method. Let's go for the map method. What map method will do is, if you want to modify the data, we can do that by using map method, because filter method won't allow us to modify the data. Its purpose is only to select the required elements. Filtering means selecting, not modification. Sometimes it is required to modify the elements of an array. Then filter method is not useful. So let me try to do that by using filter method and see the difference. For example, I want to add an element 10 for each of these elements of the first array. So for each element, I want to add 5, 12 plus 5, 45 plus 5, 10 plus 5. That means I want to modify this array by adding 5 to each of the element. Let me try to do that. Let's see what happened. So I can write modified array is equal to arr dot filter method, and which can receive an element. And for each element, I have to add 5. That means I have taken element, and for each element I am adding 5, and finally it returns the result. So now let me print this and see the difference. Save it. Now you can see this is line number 28. So line number 28 prints the exact same array. See here, it is same as the original array. Original array contains 12, 45, 10, etc. Here also 12, 45, 10, etc. This is from line number 28. But in the line number 28, what we have printed here, it should be the modified array. But here it just gives the original array, but not the modified array. That means this filter method won't perform any modifications. Even if I ask it to add some 5 or modify the existing elements, it won't do that for me, because the purpose of filter method is to filter, not to modify. That's why this is not the right example. So then how can we modify? Yes, if you have some modification requirement, then you can go with the map method. Map method also has the same syntax, but the difference is it helps us to modify the elements. So let us do that. Add 5 to each element of arr. So it's quite simple. Let modified array is equal to arr dot map method, here we should call. So it also receives an element as usually, and for each element here we are adding some 5. So let us see the result here. Modified array. Save it. Now you can see the difference. Each element is modified here. So the first element is 12, it is changed to 17. Second element is 45, it is changed to 50. Like that, for each element 5 is added, and this is the result. So now what is the difference between filter method and map method? When you want to select required elements, use filter method. If it is required to modify the existing elements, use map method. In other words, filter method is not useful for modification. Map method is not used for selection. Map method is used only for the modification, but not for the selection. Each method has its own use case. Hope you are clear with this. Okay. So now repeat the same kind with the students array also. For example, if you want to update the age of one student, so how can we do that? Okay. So try to do that by your own after this. Next. And you may ask, sir, if I want to add different values for different elements, what should I do now? For example, here a common element is getting added for each element, 5 for every element. Sir, for first element, I want to add 5. Second element, I want to add 20. For third element, I need to add a different value. Yes, you can do that. Then you need to write the different logic here. You need to write the manual. So for the if the element is first element, then you have to add 5. If it is the second element, you need to add 10. Like that, we need to write the manual logic here if you want to make such different modifications for each element in this way. The next method is for each. For each method is used for iteration purpose. So now for loop is there for iterating an array. While loop is there, for of loop is there. Then why for each method again? It is not a loop, but it is a method. For each method also used for iterating an array. So now the question is, already basic for loop is there to do the same iteration, and advanced for of loop is there to do that iteration. Then why we need one more method here like for each to do the same kind of iteration? Yes, I will show you the difference between for of and for each with a practical example. Okay, so now I want to iterate this array using for of loop. Iterate using for of loop. So I can write for, and here I can write let element of array, and just I'm going to log these elements to the console. You can see all the elements are printed. Fine, absolutely fine. But by using for of loop, you can get only the elements, but sometimes we need to get the index values also, because some operations are element based, some operations are index based. But by using this for of loop, it allows us to process data based on elements because it won't return any index here. That's why definitely the for of loop has a limitation which every time give you only the elements, so that you can perform element based operations only using for of loop, but not index based operations. So now, sir, I need to perform index based operations also. Then for of loop is not useful. Then you need to write the basic for loop. So here you can write let, so the index is 0, and I can write index less than arr dot length, okay, and index plus plus, okay, and here you are going to print the index value as well as element also. First I want to print the index value, okay, so I can write hyphen, okay, after the index I can write the element in the sense arr of index. Now you can see here you are able to get the index as well as element also. Okay, or simply yes, that's fine. You can see element and index, everything is available here. So now in many situations, sometimes you need to work with elements, sometimes you need to work with index. By using for of loop, you can perform only element based operations. If you want to perform index based operations, then definitely as of now you should use basic for loop only. But basic for loop is not so efficient in the sense, when you make some mistake in this logic, it leads to abnormal results. That's why it is better to avoid this basic for loop. So to overcome this problem, for each method is introduced, because for each method helps you to perform element based operations as well as index based operations also. So I will show you how to do that. arr dot for each. On the array, we can call the for each method. As usually, it contains a function here, and here you are going to print that element. Save it, and you can see it has returned all the elements here, whatever we need. Okay, as of now, these two are same, there is no difference. But for of loop won't give you the index. But for each method, if you need index, you need to pass the second argument here as index. Now it will give you the index also. I can write index. Now you can see it will give you the index value and the element here in this way. See here at the index 0, 12 is there, at index 1, 45. That means when it gives you the access of index, then you can perform either element based operations as well as index based operations also. But when you come to the for of loop, it will allow you to perform element based operations only, but not index based. So that is the difference. For example, if you don't want the index, you can just supply one argument. That argument will receive only element. If you supply two parameters, the first parameter to receive element, second parameter to receive index, then you have the chance to work with both elements as well as index also in this way. Okay, and one important thing is filter method returns an array. After filtering the data, it returns a result which contains the filtered content. Similarly, map method returns an array which contains the modified elements. When you come to the for each, it won't return anything. So when you keep cursor on this method, you can see it returns void, means it returns nothing. Okay, so that you no need to provide any left hand side variable when we are using for each method, because it returns nothing. Whereas filter method returns the filtered content, map method returns the modified content. For each method returns nothing because its purpose is not to return something. Instead of that, it allows you to iterate an array with both index based operations as well as for element based operations also. That is the difference. That's why here now you decide which to use, for of loop or for each method. So no need to give suggestions to you. So hey, you should use for of or for each, because clearly you understood the difference between these two, so that you can use any one of them. In some situations, you need to perform only element based operations. Then either you can use for of or for each, that's your choice. If you want to perform element and index based operations also together, then definitely for of loop not useful to you. Then you should go with for each method only. Okay, so that is about third method, for each. Okay, so you can ask me any questions you have regarding the first three methods before discussing the next three methods here. Post your doubts in the WhatsApp group. The next method that we are going to discuss is reduce. So as the name implies, this method is used to reduce the value of an array to a single element. So in which situations we can reduce an array size to a single element? When you listen to that for first time, it may be crazy, right? So reducing an array to a single element. Yes, after giving some examples, you can realize that. So for example, if I want to find the sum of elements of an array, the result is a single element. Whatever the size of the array, if I find the sum of elements, the result is a single element, single value. That is the meaning of reducing an array to a single value. So the use cases are finding the sum of elements, next finding the big number of the array. The size of the array may be 1000. Okay, 1000 elements may be there, but big number is only one element. Small number is only one element. These are the three best use cases which can help us to reduce an array to one element size. So finding the sum of elements, or finding the small number, or finding big number, we can do that very easily by using this reduce method. You already wrote programs, implemented programs to find the small number or big number, or to find the sum of elements of an array. That concept was already completed, but we are going to write that very easily by using this reduce method. So from now onwards, if I ask you to do those three tasks, definitely you prefer to use this reduce method than the logic what you have implemented till now. So let us see how to use this reduce method, and its syntax is slightly different when compared with the remaining all 5 methods here. So I will show you what is the difference here practically. Okay. So first what I will do is I can comment all this result here, because when it prints the result, it leads to let's make this console clean. So once I remove this here, all console statements, now you can see the console is clean. Where one more console statement is there, it's line number 39. Yes, here I have printed that. Let me comment that one also. Now you can see the console is clear. So now we can understand this code easily. Now let me take the use case. Find the sum of elements of ARR. Of course, we can write the manual logic for this to find the sum of elements. That is cool. But I'm going to do the same by using reduce method, so that you can see how easy it is to find the sum of elements of an array. So as usually, let sum is equal to, on array, we have to call the reduce method. So now the reduce method takes a callback function as usually. Now, if we take the remaining methods, filter method send only one argument, and map method also send one argument. But when you come to the for each method, it can send either one argument or two arguments. The first argument is element, second argument is index. Now let's come to the reduce method. This reduce method will send two arguments. The first argument we can call it as the accumulator. Second argument is called as the element. So don't get afraid about the word called accumulator. It is quite easy to understand accumulator. Accumulator means which always stores the previous result. That is called as accumulator. which always stores the previous result, is called as accumulator. So then it should return the sum of accumulator plus element. Okay, now let us print the sum here. You can see the sum is 1056. So now if you add all these values, you will get the same sum. So now, sir, it is difficult to manually verify that. So that let me take a simple array ARR1 and take 10, 20, 30, 40. So now let me call this on array1. So we can easily guess the value is 100, because when we add these all the values together, you'll get the value as 100. So now let me explain you what is happening here. But the beginners, when they look at this code, so they cannot understand what is this accumulator and how it is finding the sum of all elements here. So listen to this. So the first one is accumulator, second element. During first execution of this callback function, the reduce method sends the first element to the accumulator, second element to the element. That means the accumulator parameter receives 10 and element receives 20. That is the first iteration. So during first iteration, 10 will be received by this accumulator, 20 will be received by this element. Then it returns the sum. That means 10 plus 20, that is 30. Now this 30 is stored into this accumulator. That means I said that accumulator always stores the previous result. That's why we can call it as the accumulator. So only during the first turn, this accumulator receives the first element and this one receives the second element. And 10 plus 20 is 30. 30 is stored here. From the second run onwards, so only element will be received because accumulator is holding the previous result. So in the second iteration, it will send the third element called 30 here. The accumulator already contains the previous result, that is 30. So now it is 30 plus 30, that is 60. 60 is stored into this accumulator. And next element is 40, it will send to the element. Already accumulator contains 60. Now 60 plus 40, that is 100, and no more elements are existed. It returns the result to this, and finally we got the value as 100. So now this accumulator receives the first element only during the first turn. From the second iteration onwards, it always holds the previous operation here. Now finding the sum of elements of an array is quite easy by using this reduce method. So still, if you have any confusion about this reduce method after the session, so spend some time on it. Accumulator, the first parameter receives the first element only during the first iteration. From the second iteration onwards, only this second parameter receives the elements. The first one holds the previous result here. That is about this one. So we can find the sum of elements very easily by using this method. Next, let me take another example. So find big number. So now, of course, to find the big number, we can write the manual logic, take the for loop and compare elements. That's a lengthy process. But by using reduce method, we can do that very easily. Let big, okay, that big is equal to, so ARR1 dot, so reduce, as usually, it can take accumulator and element. And here, what it should return, the big number. That means here I can write the conditional operator. I mean the ternary operator. That means if accumulator is greater than element, okay, then it should return the accumulator. Otherwise, it should return the element. That's it. Here I have used the ternary operator syntax. What it will do during first iteration, as usually, it will receive 10, it will receive 20. Now it is comparing, is 10 greater than 20? If 10 greater than 20 is true, then it returns the accumulator. That result is stored into this variable. If it is not, it returns the element. That element is stored into this one. Same like previous example. So only during first iteration, this parameter receives first element and it receives the second element. From the second iteration onwards, so this first parameter holds the previous result, whatever returned by this one. Now let me print the big number and see here. Now the big number is 40 here. Okay, so now for example, if I take 200 as the big number, let us see what it returns to us. Yes, 200 is the big number. So now finding the big number is very easy in an array. Now even the array size is 2000 elements. So this code helps us to find the big number very easily. In the same way, you can find small number also just by changing the condition here. Okay, so that is about reduce method, so which we can use to simplify many in many use cases, like finding the sum. So finding sum of elements can be required in many situations. Okay, and this one, finding big number or small number, so that we can simplify that in this way. Now you can take the remaining, for example, let us see a specific use case here. Find the sum of elements of ARR whose values are less than 50. Let us take a complex use case here. See guys, from the very first day onwards, I am alerting you to do the paperwork. I don't know how many of you are following my guidelines. If you do not follow my guidelines, still I am fine with that, but you are going to suffer a lot. Still, I think definitely many people might suffering to write some complex programs, because we are writing complex programs day by day. The complexity of the application is increasing day by day. So the beginners who enjoyed in the beginning to write very simple programs without doing any paperwork, without using their brain, definitely they can suffer here while writing such complex use cases. Let me take this use case here. Find the sum of elements of array whose values are less than 50. That means from this array, first I should find out the elements which are less than 50, and I need to find the sum. Two things I have to do here. First thing is, I don't want sum of all elements here. First, I need to get the elements which are less than 50 from this array, and then I need to find their sum, not sum of all these elements. How can I do that? So first I need to get the elements which are less than 50. That means ARR dot filter. So you can get element here and element less than 50. And we know it returns the result. That means it returns an array whose value, that means here I can write let result is equal to, so that I can get the result here, save it. The result is this one. So now I filtered the elements whose values are less than 50. Now I need to find some of these elements. Then what I can do is, anyhow it is returning the elements less than 50. So instead of holding that into a variable, what I can do is, so now it is replacing with the values. That means it's an array with less than 50. Now on that, I'm going to call the reduce method, because this replaces with the new array whose values are less than 50. I printed the result already. Now without copying this result into a variable, let me call on this result, because once this is executed, it is replaced with an array whose value is less than 50. On that, I'm going to call the sum. So now I'm going to write the accumulator and the element here. So here it is just variable name, so no need to write the complete spelling every time. And here it should return accumulator plus element. So now you can see the result. Finally, it is going to give sum of elements. So here let me print sum of elements, and you can see the result is 191. Okay, so for manual verification, you can just identify the elements which are less than 50 and find their sum. So definitely it should be equal to 191. See here, it is actually a complex use case, but we are able to write that just in a matter of 1 or 2 lines. Okay, actually you can write it as a single line also, but for good understanding, I break that into 2 lines of the code. Okay, so in this way, we are going to implement the real world use cases by using these features. Okay, so now that is about reduce method, and the next 2 methods are really simple. Find index, both are used for searching purpose only. Finding something means searching, but the difference is find method helps us to find element. Find index can be used to search for the index of required element. Of course, both are doing same. The first one will return the element. It helps you to search for an element, but sometimes instead of element you need to get the index of element, because to perform some index based operations the element is not required, but you need index of that element. Then we can use find index. If you want only element, not the index, then you can use find method. So both are really very easy to understand. So let me do the find operation here. So I would like to do search operation. Search for 50, for example. Search for 50 in a array. So let search result is equal to arr.find. So it receives only one argument, that is element, and if the element is equal to 50, it should return that. Otherwise it returns undefined. So now let me print the search result here. Save it and you can see undefined. The reason is 50 is not existed in this one. If element is not found, it returns undefined. So if the result is undefined, that means here I can write the manual logic clearly. If such a result is equal to undefined, then element not found. Else I can write element found. Save it and you can see element not found. The reason is 50 is not existed. Let me search for 54 and save it. You can see element not found because 54 is also not there. Let me search for 32 here. 32, save it. You can see element found. So now you can see 32 element is found here. In that way, we can search for the element very easily by using this syntax. So this is the code we can use actually, and to give the proper meaning in the console, I write this if else statement. It is not required actually because the result is available. You can use it in the way you like. In very easy way, we can search for the required element in our application. Okay, sometimes not the element, I want the index. So it's very simple. In place of find method, you can just call the find index method. Here I'm writing get index of such element. So here I can write index of such element. So the only thing I have to do is change the method from find to find index. So the remaining story is same. It will search for this element. If element is there, it returns the index of that element. If element is not there, let us see what it returns. So CLG, I can write index is, comma, I can write this here. So now it is giving index is 4. Let us see, is it right or wrong? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, at index number 4, 32 is available. Fine. For example, if element is not there, what is the situation? Let me search for 50 because we know 50 is not existed. You can see it returns -1. Remember guys, the index always starts with 0 and it will be incremented by 1 to the positive side. 0, 1, 2, 3, etc. Did you get index as a negative value anytime? Never. The index is negative. Never it won't be negative because index starts with 0 and increment towards the positive side. That's why here the find index method returns in this way. If element is there, it returns the index. If element is not there, it returns -1. Now we can use this result and we can write the remaining logic. If the result is -1, if the index is -1, then that element is not available. Otherwise the element is available. So now these two are doing almost the same kind of job, but one can be used for finding the element directly. Second one is used to find index of the element. So now all these methods are completed successfully. So now you may ask, sir, in which situation find index method is useful? So can you tell me with a real world use case? Yes. Let's take this use case here. I have students array. Now I want to change the student whose roll number is 300, his age to 40. Let's take the complex use case. So let me write the use case here. Change the age of student whose S number is 300 to 40. What does it mean? First you need to search. So is there any student whose S number is 300? Okay, if for example, if he is existed, if such kind of student is existed, then you should change his age to 40. Now let us see, first of all, is there any student existed with S number 300? Yes. And his current age is 30, but we have to change that to 40. So how can we do this here? First, we need to find, is there any student existed? How can we search? By using the find method. But by using find method, it returns the object. So just by getting this object, we have no use, because we need to modify the value in this array. So if you use the find method, it returns the object to you. If you change the value in the object, it won't affect this array. So let me show you to your understanding. So let student is equal to, so students dot find. So it returns the student object, and std object dot s number is equal to 300. And let me print clg std, save it. And you can see here, student, yes, object is existed. Now I want to change the age. Then I can write std dot age is equal to 40. And now let me print the previous array, students array, and see now. Now the students array is printed. Now you can see the student age is changed to 40. Okay, so now we have received the student object and his age is changed to 40. Now let me change it to 50 here. Now you can see here, change it, its age is changed to 50, because find method returns that object and we have modified that object, so the age is clear. So now this is the usage of the find method. Okay, so now if you want to perform some changes based on the indexed operations, index operation means here it returns an object. It is a separate object actually. Now I make changes on this object, but this is the reference here. So when you make some change to the reference, it affects the original object. That's why here, even I change the value on this object, it affects the original array itself. Okay, so in that situation, we can use find method. In some situations where we want to replace one object with other object, then we can perform the index based operations also. For example, here, if I have the requirement, replace S number 200 with S number 500 and age 50. So first I need to find, is any such object is existed here with S number 200. So let std result is equal to, so I can write students dot find index, because now I need to perform index, because if you want to replace some value, splice method I should use. By using the splice method, we can replace one element with other element. But the splice method perform index based operation, not the element based. That's why here I am searching for the index. So I can take the student object and student object dot s number is equal to 200. First I need to search, is that student is available or not. Definitely it is available. Then the index is available. So now it is index of a student, because here I used the index method. Let me print this index first, and now the index is 1. Yes, because in the index number 1 that is existed. Now I need to replace this with some new values. So what should I do now? So now I need to write students dot splice. We already worked with the splice method, and here I need to write the index. And if you want to replace, I need to remove the current element and I need to write the new object whose S number is 500 and age is 50. And finally, let me print the students array here. Let me expand this. Now we can find, so for the second student, age is S number is changed to 500, age is changed to 50. That means I replaced, in this place actually S number 200 was existed. Now I replace that object with the new object. So to replace an object, definitely index is required. Then in such use cases, we can use find index method. These are just use cases to demonstrate the use of find and find index. Definitely when you are performing some search operation, you can easily understand which method should use, because you already aware of what are index based operations, what are element based operations. Depending upon the situation, you can choose these content itself. So these are the advanced methods that are available, and all these methods are available in ES6. Before ES6, these methods were not there. So we need to write only manual logic. But from the ES6 onwards, so these are most frequently performing operations on an array like searching, etc., etc. So we can do that very easily by using these functions. And these all are introduced in ECMAScript version 6. Any questions? Okay, guys. So actually, I plan to explain all these concepts to you, but I think it's not good to do that. So now I will teach you the scope of variables and I can close the session, because these creating copy is little bit advanced concept. So these 3 topics I will explain you in the next session. Okay, so because I'll give high priority to your comfort. As the beginners, when you are learning a technology, so you should enjoy it. You should enjoy the learning. Okay, you should not feel it as the burden. That's why. So I think we may get one more extra day in our training. No problem. I will explain you these topics in next day. Now let us see a simple concept called scope of variables, and we can close the session. So what is scope of variables? So now look at these guys. It would be very easy to understand. When you declare a variable outside of all functions, when you declare any variable outside of all functions, so that variable existed in the global scope. Global scope means that variable is accessible by each and every part of your program. That is called as the global scope. For example, let me create a file here. Okay, so here I have declared some variable that a is equal to 10. Now this variable is existed outside of all functions. That's why this is called as the global scope. This is called as global variable. So the use of global variable means it is accessible by each part of your application. For example, here if I write a test1 function here, for example, inside of test1 function, I am able to print the value of a. I can able to use the value of a. Now let me call the function here. Save it. You can see a is 10. That means the variables which you declared in the global space is accessible by all parts of your application. So based on this, you can decide so which kind of data we should place in the global scope. So if it is generic data which is required by remaining part of the application, you need to make it as global variable. If it is some sensitive data, if it is some confidential data, you should not make it as a global variable, because it leads to security issue. For example, if your password is there or any other sensitive data like PAN card, etc., you should not make it as the global data like this. Because if it is global, so the entire program can access, but you need to hide that. You need to make this data inaccessible for some parts of the application. At that time, you should not make such kind of sensitive data in the global scope. Only the data which is very generic and it is required by all parts of your application, make it as the global data. And when you declare any variable outside of all the functions, we can call it as the global variable which is existed in the global scope. It's clear. Next, if I declare some variable inside of a function, let us see here, let b is 10. This variable is declared inside of the function. Whenever you declare a variable inside of the function, we can call it as the local variables. This is the global variable and it is called as a local variable which has the function scope. That means this variable is accessible only within the function, not outside of the function. For example, let me try to print the value of b outside of the function. You can see it's giving you a reference error. B is not defined. You may feel, yes, B is defined here, but why it is giving like B is not defined? Yes, B is defined, but where? Not in the global scope. It is inside of the function. When any variable is declared inside of the function, that variable is called as local variable, which is in function scope. It is accessible only within the function, but not outside of the function. Let us see the lifetime difference. If you take this global variable, this variable will be created when the program starts execution, and it will be in the memory until the program's execution is completed. If I have some 1000 lines here, for example, so it will be created in the beginning. It will be there until I close this program in the memory. But if you take this local variable, so this variable will be created only when I call this function, and it will be removed from the memory once the function execution is completed. That means in the line number 10, I have called this test1 function. So only after calling test1 function, this variable is created. And after executing this body, once it reaches to this closing braces, this variable will be removed from the memory. That means the local variables have limited lifetime when compared with the global variable. Global variables will be existed in the memory and accessible by all parts of the program, whereas local variables are created only when the function is called, and they will be removed once the function execution is completed, and they are not accessible outside of the function in this way. This is called as function variables. Next. So if you declare variables instead of any block, if block or whatever it can be, they are called as block scope variables. For example, here I am writing like if b is equal to 10, then I want to declare one more variable, let's see, is equal to 30, and I want to print the value, for example. Of course, it is meaningless logic. Just to demonstrate the scopes, I am taking this. If b is 10, I want to create another variable here. Otherwise, I don't want to create anything else. Now you can see where this variable is declared. It is declared within the function. That means it is also a local variable. But what is the scope? It has the block scope, because it is inside of if block, and this has function scope. Finally, these two are local variables. Whether it is function scope variable or block scope variable, they will be created when the function is called, and they will be removed once the function execution is completed. That is common. But within the function scope, they have different thing. This variable is accessible within the function, but this variable is accessible only within the block, not outside of the function also. For example, let me try to print the value of C outside of the block. See this statement is still within this function, and this variable is also declared within this function. Let me save it. You can see you got an error like C is not defined. So what is the reason here? Let me print the value of A, CLG. So B is, let me print the value of B, save it. You can see, so B is 10. That means B is accessible because it is in the function scope. So you can access variable from the opening braces to closing braces anywhere. But if you take this C, it is declared within the block, whether it is if block or else block or for loop block or while loop block, whatever it can be, that variables are accessible only within the block, not outside of the block. If you take this statement, still it is within the function but outside of this block. That's why here you are getting error C is not defined, because this variable are accessible only within this if block, not outside of this one. So this is the story of scopes: global scope, function scope, block scope. Now, sir, what is the use of learning about these scopes? It is really very, very important. It helps you to give sufficient importance to the data. As of now, it is just ABC. So just for example, I have taken these things. But very soon you are going to work with real world data. If you have some sensitive data, so you have to provide proper security. If it is highly secure data, so you need to make it as a block scope, so that the remaining application or the same function itself cannot access the data. If it should be available within the function, you can make it as the function scope variable. So only within the function it is accessible, but not outside of the function. If some data is required by the remaining application, make it as global data. Like that, based on importance of the data, you can keep it either in global scope or function scope or block scope. That is about variable scopes. Hope you are clear with this one. So it is enough for the day. Now you can ask any questions, or else you can leave the session.